Everybody for joining us today for our Bloomfield Township Trustees January 22nd meeting. If we could start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So first I'd like to start with public comment. So if anybody has any public comment, please come on up to the podium. Yes.
Good evening. I'm Mike McCready, 4957 Bloomfield Ridge. I came to talk about our roads and our snow we had over President's Weekend. I live off of Lone Pine and Telegraph Road, and our roads starting on Friday evening were a mess. I saw police officers on the video, not in person, pushing cars on Telegraph Road. And then as we knew the storm was coming in, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, the ice that had frozen on Lone Pine Road, specifically between Telegraph and Lasser Road, had to have been 3 to 4 inches thick. And the same was on over off of Long Lake. I don't think I ever remember seeing our roads in this condition before. And I've been a resident on and off in the township for probably 30 years, and prior to that I was over in the city of Bloomfield Hills, and our roads have always been maintained very well, and I was shocked at the condition of our roads through the storm, which we had plenty of notice it was coming. And I know we work in coordination with the county on clearing many of the roads I just mentioned, but usually in backup, the local community will step up and help out. I don't know where there was a communication failure or just poor planning, but I'd encourage the trustees and the supervisor maybe to get a group together to look and try and resolve this so we don't go through it again. I think it's really a colossal failure myself. And I know we can all point fingers, but really I think the responsibility lies on our own shoulders. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Just after that.
Yeah. We can go ahead and start the 10 minutes.
Do we each get one?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
My name is Mark Intockley. I reside at 1550 Georgetown Drive. I just handed out to the members of the board a copy of this envelope. The return address is the city of Bloomfield Hills. It has 1550 Georgetown Drive listed on there, and it says early voting information for elections. I find this deeply concerning that I would be receiving this type of information to my home from another municipality, especially with the coordination of the system with the state of Michigan and the driver's license information coming through, plus with the state of Michigan regarding addresses, not to mention the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, which requires, which allows the removal of individuals that don't update their addresses or vote in the prior elections, 2 prior federal elections, and that's according to Houston versus A. Philip Randolph. So hopefully the township can look into this and find out what happened and advise me what happened and why I would receive this kind of information. I think it's critical to election integrity. And hopefully that will be covered under later on in the meeting as one of the agenda items. I believe it is number 15. And I also wanted to ask about the IT agreement. And the transfer of data and the transfer of election data, none of that information is in the packet. And considering the township transfers data from the local precincts to Oakland County, and from what I believe, and from the clerk's office to the county, why isn't that information included in the IT services package? I think that would be a critical part of election integrity, especially since Oakland County is involved in validating what's happened here in the township. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Okay, no, I'll go ahead and close the public comment, and I do have something prepared for the roads. Additionally, I've been here 51 years, never left, this is my home, and I also have never seen the county's response to this issue be so bad. The one good thing that came is we also were frustrated with the road commission's response to the county roads. However, we are encouraged to see that they have taken accountability for the breakdown of their operations. They actually did go publicly on TV and admitted that they had from the Waterford Garage, which is why West Bloomfield, Commerce, Waterford, and Bloomfield were so substantially underserved that weekend. They had multiple breakdowns, and they also had new dispatchers who were not familiar with the fact that we're the only township in the state who could legally step up if they had allowed us, because we're the only township in the state with a road department, and that's because we have higher expectations than most of the other townships. So unfortunately, those dispatchers, when our police dispatchers called multiple times, about 40 times over the weekend, begging to let us help on the quadrant from 14 Mile to Long Lake, from Corton all the way to Lasser, the trucks in that area that were not able to service it, we continuously called, begging to help. And again, those dispatchers aren't familiar with the township actually having a road department, so we were told no. We did, however, step up. Some things we are allowed to do legally. We are not legally allowed to touch their roads. Again, those are county roads. You can't touch them unless given permission, and we were not until after the storm was over for future ones. But we were able to clear 50 of the trees that did fall in the county roads. That is something we're allowed to touch without getting permission. So the DPW staff did clear 50 trees in addition to doing all of the neighborhood roads. So again, with being the only township in the state of Michigan with the road department, we do have an agreement with the RCOC, is the Road Commission for Oakland County, that we do the neighborhood roads. That is why you saw your neighborhood roads better than the main roads, because on Friday, our team was ready. They had already gone out there. They started at 5 p.m. on Friday. They continued till 1 a.m. on Saturday morning. They do legally have to sleep, so I know some were upset with us that they didn't continue for 48 hours straight, but we do legally give them time to sleep. Some of them sleep in cots here in the DPW because they live so far away. They slept for about 4 hours, 5 hours, and went back out on the roads again at Saturday, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. And then they continued every single day to try and make up for what was left behind for us to clean up. Some have reached out saying, actually complaining that we were salting when it was below 20. And to let people know, we have invested, again, not only have we the only township that invested in a road department, but we also invest in the best options out there. So people are correct. Plain salt, under 20, don't bother putting it down. We have a brine mixture that goes with it. It's a liquid, I believe a chloride liquid that goes with it. After they fill up with the salt, they go through, it sprays the top, they have fillers, and that allows it to go down to about 10 degrees. And then with the sun that we had, we were able to capitalize, thank goodness, on some sunny days. So as mentioned, there's a hard pack that got created based on the fact that unlike Farmington Hills got about 2 inches, we got 6.5 to 7 inches in most of our areas of ice and snow. And there was about a 3 to 4 inch buildup of hard, they call it hard pack. And in order to break that down, it takes days at these temperatures. Unfortunately, we were not given permission to do that until Monday, which of course was MLK weekend. But on Monday, I was able to reach executives from RCOC, and they were willing to let us do that. So we did start helping breaking some of this stuff up, and it was broken up by Wednesday. Again, this is not just our area, but they did have failures in the 4 surrounding areas. They since have allocated different trucks to our area and have mixed up some of the dispatchers, so it's not all the new ones in one area. And they have agreed that we can reach out directly to them instead of going through dispatch, so we don't have the communication problem where somebody's offering to help and they say no because they assume, like every other township, we don't have a road department. So again, our DPW staff was out there. It takes 12 to 16 hours to do one pass of our 200 miles of neighborhood roads. We have 12 plows that cover 200 miles. In that snow and in that mess, it took 16 hours. So it was not the light, fluffy snow that we look forward to. So it did take longer. But they were able to do multiple passes, 2 to 3 passes in areas by Saturday. So they were out there, like I said, 5 o'clock on Friday on our neighborhood roads. We did ask about 40 times, and Jimmy was polite enough to get me the list because I couldn't believe it was that many, but it was about 40 times from Friday through Sunday, and then I was able to get a hold of their executives on Monday. So because they were able to go on, when somebody takes accountability, I'm willing to say that that's a big step in today's society. A lot of people like to point fingers or use something to their advantage. Instead, they stood up and said, we really messed up. And they went on air with us and talked about it. They admitted the failures with the trucks, the failures with the training, the failures that they had with. It's really hard to get people to drive snowplows. And if you are, we're hiring and they're hiring. If you know anybody with a CDL that's willing to do snowplow, they were all hiring. But the fact that they stood up and publicly admitted it, and they've made changes and they've already changed around some of their activities and their operations, I do have faith that they're standing behind that and that we shouldn't see that problem again. If we do, again, we do have connections now directly with the executives that are willing to allow us to step up. Now, we don't want them to rely on us because then that means they're not doing our neighborhood roads, which again, we don't want to switch one for the other. They should be maintaining the county roads like they do in all of the 21 townships of Oakland County. So again, you are correct. This is the worst I've ever seen in my 51 years here. All of us here have also agreed that this was frustrating, but they did admit to their issues, and our DPW hopefully will be able to step in next time hopefully it never happens, but if it does, luckily they do trust our DPW department enough that they will allow them to step in. Any questions? Yeah?
Yeah, just comment. No, I agree with you. It was a colossal failure, and we talked about it before, I know. But it's great that they stood up and admitted they were failures, but these were significant failures. These are the worst failures I've ever seen in all my years on the board and living in the township. Most complaints I've ever received from residents had to do with this. And this really was a safety issue, and I think it shows really unprofessional and poor leadership by the road commission, not us. I'll get to us in a minute. But the road commission really takes the brunt of this. And it became a safety issue, certainly up Telegraph. And, you know, they can come up with every excuse imaginable. People aren't trained, they don't have trucks are on back order, whatever it is. Their job is to make sure that the main trunk lines are serviced properly and that they're pre-treated. They know what the weather is. We all knew what was coming. They didn't take care of it. And then we had situations where, especially on Telegraph, where trucks, semis couldn't get up the hills. There were problems, it really became an issue for our police department, for public safety. So, I mean, no matter what they say and take responsibility, I don't have the confidence that you do that they're going to do it better next time, because they've been doing a very poor job for a long time when the weather is bad. But they did have the assets, they just did not allocate them properly. Whatever they did, they didn't put them on Telegraph, which is probably the most important and potentially dangerous road in this area, because it's a trunk line and very, very highly traveled. The other thing, I disagree with you respectfully as far as two things. We don't need the authority of the road commission in a public safety issue. We have in all three prior administrations, going from Fred Corzon, Dave Payne, Leo Savoy, if there was a public safety issue, not just to go out there, it was done. And I think this became a public safety issue. And I agree it shouldn't be done all the time, so they're relying on us, but we shouldn't have to have 40 phone calls into them. We should either make the decision or we should have their cell phones. I just think it wasn't handled well on all sides. They took the brunt of the responsibility, but I think all of us could have done better, and I really don't want to see this again.
And the things we could do, such as the life safety of the trees, just like that, we could do, but we legally can't touch the roads.
I disagree.
I've reviewed the contract on another issue fairly recently, not in detail on this particular issue for exceptions like this, but moving forward, if there's a desire, maybe that's something we can address in a.
But it has been done previously. It really has been. When Bill Hampton was our general counsel, it was done. When it had to be done, not just to go in and help, but it was a public emergency and safety issue like it is now, or was.
And I understand that. What I'm saying is, I reviewed the contract not on this particular issue fairly recently, so I'm familiar with it. I know the township has designated responsibility. Others are reserved for the road commission, such as Telegraph.
Right, that's a state.
And I don't know what, I did not review the exception language to that, so I will review that. And what I'm saying is, this is an annual contract, and if it needs to be addressed, we can deal with it next year.
And that would be going through MDOT too, because as you know, that's not even a county road, that's a state road.
I
So
understand.
Woodward, Square Lake, and Telegraph, that's why I'm sure you saw the coverage on channels 2. They actually showed the RCOC road truck stuck in that traffic.
No, I
as well.
understand whose roads they are, who's responsible, and all of that, but everybody around here, first of all, thinks that we're responsible and they are our roads, which we know they're not. However, we need to do a better job of getting the word out whose roads they are and assisting when we need to. And if we need to codify or that or memorialize it in some way, I think we need to do that, because this should never happen again.
And that's what they have said that they're willing to do going forward, that we don't have to go through dispatch, we can go through them directly. One other thing too to mention, the pre-treatment, that couldn't be done as well as we weren't able to, because I'm sure you remember it rained for 3 days prior. So if you put liquid pre-treat down, it just ends up on the side of the roads.
Yeah, but they also waited too long. They could have salted earlier, and by the time it was too
So
late.
I just mean that
Yeah.
we weren't even able to
Oh, I know
pre-treat.
that.
So
I know
that's
that.
something we couldn't even have.
I was referring to them.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything? No? All right. And then another change for the agenda, we are going to be postponing the discussion of the recruiting, because we have a couple more things we want to finish for that as well, to give you updates. So we want to have it all in one big update. So that'll be in the next meeting. Thanks, Jimmy, though. You still had to come for another one. That's okay.
Rather get it all worked out than not.
There you go. So next we have approval of the board minutes of January 8th. Unless there's any changes or suggestions, I'd look for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by trustee Barnett,
Second.
support by trustee Kalinsky. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? That does pass. Next, we have the document management system packet, our project kickoff and update by Clerk Brook. And, I apologize, and Taylor Lydon.
Taylor Lydon with us, and online we have Bill Rafferty, and those two individuals and others on their team are helping to do this. As you all know, we selected Security Archives as as our vendor for this purpose. And what we're doing here is trying to have a comprehensive data management system. Yes, there are a variety of users and variety of requirements and demands. I mean, police is different than elections. Elections and police are different than regular, clerk information with regard to the Board of Trustees. And so we all have different needs. And Security Archives is helping us walk through that, identify the needs of each different department, work through and identify the work processes, and then help us move toward finding preparing an RFP and finding a vendor who is going to help us identify the best tool going forward. Right now, we have paper archives that go back almost 200 years, and scanned documents, and a local iDrive, or where we store different records, desktops where people store records. It's not a comprehensive way of doing it, and if we do this right, we're going to be more efficient internally, more effective in doing our work, and we'll all have better access to the records. So. Taylor, take it away. I look forward to hearing a little update.
Thanks. You're not alone in that challenge, if that makes you feel any better. We see it all the time, especially in the municipal space. But my name is Taylor Lydon. I'm the owner and president of Security Archives Data Management. First off, thanks for including us today. We appreciate the opportunity to present a little bit about our business and our work plan in accomplishing this particular RFP on behalf of Bloomfield. I think I can get this. Just as a brief introduction to our business, Security Archives Data Management, we've been in operation since the mid-1980s. The foundation of our business was really built in off-site commercial record storage. That started in the 1980s. Supporting services grew from there and really got into records management consulting in the mid-1990s. We've always been rooted in Detroit and the surrounding area, so really serving businesses, organizations, municipalities, agencies, et cetera, across Southeast Michigan. In our main facility, this is where we conduct a majority of our business is out of our 100,000 square foot record center, located on the east side of Detroit on East Jefferson. I joke that it's built and looks like a jail, and it's a great looking building. Yeah, thank you. It's a sanctioned bomb shelter. So I joke with a lot of our clients that a bomb could hit our facility and your records will probably still be intact. And if there's an apocalypse, you know where to find me. As I mentioned, our core service offering, our foundational service offering was in offsite record storage. But as you'd imagine, over the past couple of decades, our service menu has grown quite substantially in response to client need and changing market environment. So today, while offsite record storage is still a big part of our business, we offer a lot of supporting and peripheral services like shredding and destruction, e-recycling programs, scanning and digitization, with that digital archiving and digital retrieval, data backup, and more. From a records management consulting perspective, we've worked on hundreds of engagements on things like building retention manuals and retention schedules, implementing record management programs, reorganizing record management programs, document identification, indexing, and more. And that's why we're excited to be engaged with the township in this particular assignment. So, as I'm sure you're probably familiar, we've been selected to help lead and assist the township in identifying, selecting, and implementing a document management system that will take into consideration all the departmental records, both physical and digital, and make sure that it integrates with your local environments, as Martin was speaking to. So all your tools, processes, systems that you currently have in place. The timeline, we do anticipate having the project completed within 12 months, with a majority or a bulk of the consulting work being completed in the first 6 months, and that will include departmental interviews. And I would just note that Martin, with his direction, and team, Dina and Will, have really got us off to a great start. We are on track. To date, we've already interviewed 3 different departments: the clerk's office, finance, engineering. We have 3 or 4 more meetings this week and 5 next week. So we anticipate we will stay on track, and Martin and team have been a big help on that front. We do want to highlight that we have engaged in this type of work in the past of very similar size and scope. Here were some of the references we provided for this particular proposal. Our team recently completed a very similar project for Detroit Water and Sewer Department. Very similar timeline, very similar work plan. Similarly, we just completed an implementation or reorganization, really, of Grosse Pointe Public School System's records management program. So really, we have extensive knowledge in this space, and the team in which we'll be assigning to this particular engagement is highlighted here on the slide. And joining me today remotely is the lead project manager, Bill Safety. Bill's really the key difference maker in this engagement. I wouldn't really be doing his resume any justice, but he has really decades and extensive knowledge in all things records management. It's worth noting he's a published author, publishing textbooks that are used in the CRM or the Certified Records Management Program. He'll be supported by Assistant Project Manager Theis Bolden. They've worked together on similar engagements in the past with excellent results, and will be supported as needed by our Head of Operations or Head of IT, Bill Tagg, another individual who has decades experience in records management and offsite record storage. Bill will walk you through a little bit about our proposed approach and work plan, talk a little bit more about our departmental interviews and what we hope to achieve, and then talk to you a little bit about final implementation and closing out the project. Bill, as long as you can hear me, I'll turn it over to you.
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me okay?
Well, I can. I just don't think anyone else maybe can.
Not exactly.
Hang tight one moment, Bill. All right, Bill, you want to try that again?
All right, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. I can't see you, so I'm assuming that I'm getting through.
There are thousands of people here waiting for what you have to say.
This is a pretty straightforward project, and I think doesn't mean it's a simple project. It's a challenging one, but we've divided the project really into two major phases. The first phase will culminate in the writing of an RFP for the procurement of a document management system, and the second phase will involve us supporting you in working with the vendor in selecting the vendor and implementing that system. So right now we're focusing on the information that we need to do the RFP. And the way that we do this is by meeting with the individual departments, discussing their records, determining what their requirements are, and trying to identify which among the records they maintain are candidates for a document management implementation where you could realize some of the benefits of document management. And so far we've met, as Taylor mentioned, with the clerk, with finance, and with today with the engineering. I think all those meetings have gone pretty well from our perspective. We're getting the information we want. We have almost all of the other meetings scheduled. There are still a few yet to schedule. But the project is absolutely on the timeline, or maybe a little ahead of the timeline that we forecast. So we don't see any problem with bringing this project in on time or a little bit ahead of schedule. When we meet with the departments, we're not doing an audit or an investigation. We just want to know what kinds of records they have, what they're doing with those records, and from that we can identify, or hopefully identify, which of the records that are likely to benefit from having document management technology. After we meet with all the departments, we'll present a summary of our findings and proceed to writing the RFP. So we've done this kind of thing before. We try to stick with the method that's tried and true, but that doesn't mean that we have the RFP in the drawer. It's got to be customized for your purposes. So we're trying to learn at this stage. We're just trying to learn what we can about your operations. I could take some questions if somebody has them.
No?
Very comprehensive.
Okay.
Great.
No questions, yes.
So far, so good. Everything is going pretty well. Nobody has thrown us out of their office, so we're doing fine.
Yeah, usually one of the biggest challenges we face is getting these meetings scheduled with the appropriate personnel. But we really, again, with Martin's team, they've already provided us with a list of contacts. We've already been in contact with almost everyone to get these meetings scheduled, and that at times can be what kind of holds up and hinders a project like this. So we're excited about the engagement. We're certain we can deliver excellent results and have the implementation done on time. At any point, we'd invite any of you to come visit our facility, the bomb shelter, or contact us if you have any questions about this particular engagement. But thanks again for including us. We appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have presentation of the after action report from the mass casualty training presented by both Chief Gallagher and Chief LeRoy.
Good evening.
Thanks, Sean. Tonight, we just want to give a brief after-action report, discussion on the after-action report from our training incident we did back in August. Lieutenant Mike Buchek is here, who is the, yeah, Mike can come on up. He can come stand next to me in case he wants to add. Mike was instrumental in planning this with the fire department. I think it was Captain Sobey from the fire department that they partnered with. So we just wanted to kind of give a rundown of what happened that day, kind of recap it, and then what we learned and where we need to improve as agencies. And then shortly after that, we partnered with our cable studio, and Carrie and her team. I think there was 12, at least 12 of the cable studio personnel who worked hard at trying to video and capture some of these moments for us in the future. So just a real quick recap. This was August 30th. It was a Wednesday. From 10 a.m. to noon was the actual live scenario. But the day and the timing and the planning started almost a year in advance. We approached Supervisor Walsh at that time and Jason and talked about the need to facilitate one of these, and we had the willing participants of the school, which is a unique opportunity that we didn't want to pass up. So on that day, we used Bloomfield Hills High School as our location of the incident, and personnel-wise that responded that day, there was 50 law enforcement personnel from 12 agencies. The fire department's with Oakway, and if you want to touch on Oakway real quick.
Yeah, Oakway is our mutual aid association, which has 11 full-time fire departments in the area. So 7, possibly 8 were able to participate that day and volunteered their resources to us, which greatly benefited the scale of the type of scenario that we were envisioning.
Right. With the help of the fire department, again, there was 20 nursing students who were moulaged, so they had makeup and were really decorated out and dressed up as true victims. One of the hardest parts that and one of the biggest challenges we face when running one of these types of scenarios is recreating that stress or that emotion, which we can never duplicate. We talk about that in this, so we try to create it as much as we can. And while we did create some of that, I think it was more for the teachers at that point, but that participated that day, we still try to recreate some of that for the officers going into these and fire personnel going into these. There was approximately 600 school district employees in the building that day. Many of them participated and acted either in the role they would serve in the school or as pretending to be students. There was one we practiced our Alice drills with the schools. There was one request that Mike and his team had, was that we know that many of the teachers would have tried to run in the run, hide, fight type scenario, but we asked them that for that day, think of alternatives, as we didn't want to create, and you'll see in a minute the safety protocols that we had to go through. So the goal of this exercise was to check the preparedness of our local law enforcement and fire departments and demonstrate our ability to coordinate an efficient and effective response in conjunction with the school district. Chief LeRoy mentioned Oakway, and you guys have heard me mention in the past OakTAC. It's our version of that, where we partner with all our agencies around, and in this case we had 11 different police agencies. The scenario was designed to test first responders' response in the first 2 hours only of an active shooter at Bloomfield Hills High School, and then the fluid training event and the decisions of the participants would dictate the outcome, meaning that the officers and the fire personnel who were on scene and the incident commanders, their decisions would affect the outcome of this scenario. And it was really a unique experience for our agency. And again, I can't give enough to our training cadre, Carrie's team, and the preparedness and the school district in preparing this incident. Hundreds of hours. So we talk about strict safety protocols, and again, you'll see a 5-minute video here when we're done to show kind of how the day went. But there was strict security protocols and safety protocols on scene. Just some of the things we did, there was a perimeter was searched and taped off and cordoned off. We had traffic posts that officers that were either on duty or other agencies, Oakland County provided, that we could completely shut down the area. There was an actual rapid response team stationed at the fire station that was fully geared up in the event that there was a real life emergency based on the public knowledge that we had of this incident. We wanted to make sure that the first responders who had real firearms but were taken apart so they couldn't fire a firearm weren't caused from somebody on the outside, which is something that's newer to what we have to do nowadays, kind of an overwatch. Every person who entered the building was searched. Even the police officers and all the vehicles that we brought there that day. All of our firearms that were live that day were made safe utilizing barrel safety sticks. So that way, if any other participants in this did not see a firearm that had some type of projectile sticking out of it, the scenario was to be shut down by anybody. It could have been a teacher, could have been an officer just participating in the scenario. Those are crucial. All police vehicles were searched, as I said, and then all active participants were accompanied by proctors. So even the personnel who were responding into the school that day as active contact teams or rescue task force personnel had a training proctor with them as a safety, that if something were to go wrong, we could end that scenario and break that scenario until things got better. Anything to add, John? No. So real quick, a timeline of the incident. So this incident began with a 911 call advising of a suspicious male with a rifle near the football field. The scenario was set up to be a fluid training event, again, with the decisions made dictated by the outcome of the officers. And so the call came in via one of our school liaison officers, and the things in red I highlighted just to kind of touch on. At 10:04, the Blue Point alarm was activated, and I'll discuss the Blue Point here in a minute just to give a brief rundown for those who don't know what it is again, but that's the alarm system inside. So again, the first call came in at 10:02. At 10:05, our first contact team, as we call it, enters the building. They enter the building near where the call came in. At that point, our officer engaged with the suspect, and our officer suffered a gunshot wound. And we'll see later that was one of the things that we could have done better on it. We enter a certain area of the building. We establish incident command, and at 10:09, so 7 minutes into this incident, the shooter was neutralized near a room. At 10:19, and these things were built in for a purpose, because on all mass casualty incidents that we've seen or that we debrief across the country, there always seems to be a ghost call or a secondary call, and whether that's because a victim runs to a location and somebody thinks there's another incident. If you use Las Vegas as an example, there were I can't remember the number, hundreds of false calls all night long, and that's because they had victims who ran almost 3 miles before they collapsed into a third building. So Mike and his crew specifically added some ghost calls there so that more participants from the fire and the police side could be actively engaged in these incidents, because as we saw like in Nashville, those first 3 officers in a real life situation entered that building and eliminated that threat pretty quickly before the other officers were on scene. So we wanted the value to be there for our people. At 7 minutes after that, at 10:26, another call comes in for shots fired at the cable studio, and then a victim was calling for help on Echo Road. Again, this is an exercise, so when I'm going through the timeline, if you're just joining, this is all part of a training exercise. At 11:04, so we're looking at almost an hour, was when we were able to start getting buses loaded up with our the teachers who were pretending to be students to transfer to our gathering place. But it took an hour and about 10 minutes for us to realize that we forgot about, as we were clearing the building, we didn't forget, we just hadn't made it there yet, that the administration, i.e. the assistant principals and principals, were locked in the main office hiding, which again, in a few minutes, you'll hear me talk about why that's too long for that to be happening. And then at 11:45, the school is clear and all victims are transported to there. If I step back a minute, at 11 minutes after the initial call that came in, the fire department had their first rescue task force teams entering the building, which is a pretty impressive timeline on something like that. That's from call to response to geared up in their rescue task force geared in and starting to triage patients. So that is there. And then by 11:45, the school was cleared, and that included a secondary sweep. And when I talk a secondary sweep, other than the auditorium, was where there was a couple areas of the school that were off limits for the teachers that were not participating. That entire building had been checked multiple times. And so that's, for an hour and 45 minutes, that's pretty well done. Real quick on the Blue Point alarm, I won't spend too much time on this, but the Blue Point alarm is exactly what you see there. It's similar to a fire alarm. It's activated by pushing in and pulling down on that call box there, and that immediately notifies our dispatch center. It sends an immediate text message, email to the specified personnel. All of our schools are going to this, and so is Birmingham schools. The high school, I believe, has 38-ish poll stations at this time, if I remember correctly. But most of our schools are only going to have a few locations, but it's very similar. They're all going to be Blue Point, they just won't have as many poll stations, which is good because we all saw what happened a couple years ago when we had a false alarm. This is what the message looks like if it were to come to one of our phones now. So if it were to be pulled right now, both John and I, Chief LeRoy and I's phones would, and Lieutenant Buchek's command phone would display this, and we are already en route a lot of times before the call's even dispatched.
And it's not just us, it's also all of our command vehicles, senior staff, everybody like that.
Correct. And our other surrounding agencies get it as well, their command staff. And this is just the map showing there. This real quick, I'll fast forward just for a second on this if I can. This is an actual video of the Blue Point alarm, and the only reason why we included this was to show you how fast and how quick we can become overwhelmed with people. This is one of the things we could not recreate that day, but this is a real life scenario when the Blue Point alarm was activated back in December of 19. And as this goes forward, I don't know if I can fast forward or not, but that parking lot eventually becomes completely overwhelmed with individuals, and so did our township hall. So what went well? Our officers and rescue task force personnel followed their training. We learned that the training that we've been doing for probably 10 years now with our fire department, that mindset for our fire personnel has changed to when they get on scene, they're fully in gear. They would almost be, minus the police outfit, with raid vests and raid helmets. They're prepared to go into a building to save lives instead of waiting for us to come out. The officers were within the building within 3 minutes. The threat was neutralized within 7 minutes. And again, rescue task force was within 11 treating exercises. And the secondary search was completed by 11:45 with 15 minutes early. I'm going to touch on the first couple, and John can touch on that. We learned, for those that went through the Unified Command Training or ICS training, that the police department struggles with incident command. We are standardized, respond, get in, neutralize a threat. And so that's one of the things that we have to work on as police officers in a police agency, and that's across all law enforcement. John will tell you multiple times, is consistent terminology and meaning of the words that were consistent with the fire department. Example here is we set up an incident command right in front of the school. Fire Incident Command went straight there. That became our Unified Incident Command, where in turn you want your Unified Incident Command off-site. We shouldn't be able to see that building. We should be able to just hear and trust that the bosses on scene are telling us what's going on. Part of that is John and I were taken out of the scenario, and so same with some of our senior staff, so that we could observe and watch the scenario. Some of those incident command issues would have been resolved just based on the relationship we have and gone off without a hitch in a true scenario. So, but we recognize the shortcoming there. We need to train our police department more on the staging area, because we typically don't stage often, and then have the accountability piece as our fire partners do. The gathering site, I call it gathering location instead of reunification center, but that was in this incident was the Kirk, and that was way too close to the proximity to the location of the incident, where those roadways would have been shut down, so it would have been difficult. And then recognize the importance of those building administrators, because they have the keys and they have a lot of knowledge of that building, and can help us out rather quickly, and it took us an hour to get to them. So.
One of the things that we've seen on our side is we need to change the way we train. For 10 years, 12 years, we've been training strictly on the rescue task force, and rescue task force is more of a tactic instead of a be-all, end-all. You don't need it in every case. You may need it initially, but you can phase it out over a short period of time. Once it's being recognized across the country that once you secure overwhelming force, I'll call it, in an area, you can then secure entire wings of a building with all the officers that you have, and then almost treat it like a normal mass casualty incident. None of them are normal, but they can move in. You can move patients on cots. You don't have to move them out to a secondary area, a safer area. You can just apply a lot more resources more efficiently and quickly to get them to the hospital faster. But that's just one of those things. We've trained it. It's been drilled into our heads. We just need to adopt a new philosophy during the trainings moving forward, which will help us. Placing the appropriate personnel in command position and external positions. Early on, we were trying to take our on-duty personnel and put them into command or leadership roles that you know need to be filled, but it takes away from patient care and getting people inside to help more people faster. Those positions, we've recognized that we can't fill those. If this happened on a Friday afternoon, we can't fill those with the people that are on the apparatus. They need to be filled by our mutual aid partners that are coming in to assume those roles in order to assist us, and then it'd be delayed, but it'd be better for the people on scene. The treatment of moving patients more efficiently, we just need to get more people. The quicker you can get more personnel inside with the equipment and get them off-site into the hospital, the more it's going to benefit everybody involved. It gives everybody a fighting chance if you can get them to the hospital. It does us no good if we can't move them quickly and they're stuck inside and delayed. And then we ran into a notification of the hospitals. Oakland County was, as a result of this incident, prior to it, or incident training, they were going to adopt a model of using an app on your iPad to contact the hospitals, because the radio system, we're in the process of a changeover to a new county-wide radio system that the hospitals were not going to be on, and they were trying to establish a new way other than cell phone to do it. As a direct result of this, the hospitals and the state recognize that that's not going to work, and they're in the process of, most likely, still haven't fixed the problem. The new radio system will be shut, or the old radio system will be shut down on March 31st, and they're most likely going to end up on the new radio system, forced to by the state and the medical control authorities. They realized that was a huge problem.
And that's one of the things we did see, a couple, just piggybacking off of Chief LeRoy, was we did have a lot of police officers on scene waiting for an assignment where we could have, if we move to these roles of locking down wings where we can keep them safe, and we can get double the amount of people into the our rescue personnel. So one thing that we learned. Overall, though, it was an excellent response time and performance of our officers. I think Lieutenant Buchek will tell you, and I think he was very pleased that day as the oversight of the entire operation, that in the event we were to have an incident here in Bloomfield Township, we are very confident in the ability and the response from our officers. We did not see anybody hesitate to do their job, and while it's a scenario and an exercise, we still added some stress to it to make them there. It's obviously there's a return on investment in terms of our department training, and we definitely strengthened our partnership and communication with our school districts, and it really showed our officers and fire personnel how important it is to get into these buildings. These buildings are massive, and they're designed differently than a lot. And then our OAKTAC and Oakway training and cooperation is critical in these threats of violence, and we'll always be big proponents of those. And then there was the participating agencies that came. Again, we had about 11 police agencies and 7 fire agencies, all still while taking the runs out there that day. So, Sean, do you have that video pulled up from our, and I'll kind of walk through, John and I can kind of walk through the video. It's going to start off by showing how the officers are all going to our range, getting their weapons all cleared out. You can see it's an entire process. We could not have a training mistake that could cost someone their lives or get somebody injured. It would have been totally unacceptable. And we have been to trainings in the past at other places where we're just kind of like, how do we know everything's safe? We had some good markings on it. just some of our gear that we would go into. All this is standard issued.
All Troy, make sure you have tape on your guns because we can't see the flag.
We had training proctors from several different agencies here helping us search people and search officers.
Feel free to leave. Thank you. If you want to just come back to
This
stage.
was conducted a safety briefing prior to anything even starting with what was expected. See something, the stops, everything like that in case of emergency.
We're going to participate in the last minute not show.
Blue point alarm just activated.
This is them responding. Officer Eller there's in that vest. He's one of the proctors going with every single crew, and every crew had. Every contact team had one of those proctors in them. The yellow vest indicates that they're off limits or that they are a proctor.
And one place that we were a little not deficient on, but just on the planning part was accounting for the correct amount of time to delay the resources from the time they pulled out from the senior center and arrived on scene. We tried staggering it so it was realistic, but still some of those resources ended up on scene very quickly, even probably too quickly.
And as you can see here, the fire personnel are getting into their, what we would refer to as a rescue task force gear, but ballistic vests, ballistic helmets, and their rapid response bags that they would take in to these situations. And this is really no different than you would see for the fire personnel with the staging of the ambulances in a incident where the rescues are waiting for their assignment. They'd be sitting in the parking lot waiting until their assignment. Where they needed. The last thing you want is put them all in the front of that building if they're needed in the back of the building and have all their gear out. They're waiting. This here is where our second call came in, or one of the ghost calls came in at the cable studio, and I believe in a minute you'll see this is a contact team. Go through this door. Yes. Communication's key in these. As we had multiple contact teams entering these buildings. You can see two different contact teams there. Crossfire is a big deal. So it's kind of what we went through that day. Internally as a whole township, it gave us an opportunity to later on do a tabletop exercise to it, and it gave us the opportunity with Dan and working with Danny that to make sure our house was in order here, that now we know who's going to be contacting all the elected officials and all the department head personnel, or opening the EOC, and what critical resources we may need at that time. And I'll tell you from our perspective, even though this was a scenario and we were oversight of it, we were both very busy that day in that situation. So it was beneficial to all. And I think, Mike, the feedback from other agencies Very
positive.
Was very positive,
Yes.
that it was a true, they felt like it was a real life scenario. So that was good news from us. So any questions from the board?
No, just,
Thank you, chiefs. How many other agencies have done something like this?
To this scale?
To this scale, not many. Every year, Oakway, the training coordinators have been given the objective of one of these on a smaller scale planned. We did one at the UWM football fields the previous year. Waterford has also done one. We're trying to do one a year in some way, shape, or form, and not just always in school, but trying to plan or game plan what the bad guys are thinking in the scenarios that could happen. One of our biggest threats now is open air targets. So football game on a Friday night, or a parade, or a commercial building on the day after Thanksgiving, something like that. You have to think of all these different dynamic events that are happening and try to game plan in your head what's going on.
I'll tell you, as Lieutenant Bochek just reminded me, to this magnitude and to partner with the school district with all on a professional development day, I would say none. There's been these scenarios at the mall and things of that nature. We helped out probably 2 weeks later, maybe a month later at Great Lakes, where Mike and his training cadre were part of that observation crew and evaluation crew. But to be able to streamline it like we did with the cable studio and then also the IT into the auditorium, I don't know if it's been that elaborate.
Yeah, that's kind of what I figured, and so I wanted to applaud you guys for that. The lieutenant said that the feedback from the other agencies was positive, so they felt it was a worthwhile experience. What was the feedback from the school district?
Mike, you met with the school district. What we got was they truly enjoyed it. When I say enjoyed it, felt it was valuable. We had some people who felt it was, but you met with the schools.
I did. Their feedback was also very positive. They learned a lot from it, and they feel they're better prepared because of that exercise that day. And their planning was instrumental in it. And to add to what the chief said, I've been to a lot of different trainings for different departments, and I can say that on this magnitude, it's essentially unprecedented how large scale this was, with up to 600 employees in the building, to be able to do it with actual weapons that we use, that we made them safe. It was just a huge undertaking, and other agencies haven't done that. They've simulated this, but they've never recreated the stress where they use bells as gunshots and things like that, whereas we actually use blanks and things to create the stress to try to make this as real life as possible. But the feedback was very good from them, and then they have their list of things that they can improve on as well, and they were working on that as last I heard.
That's also why we added the moulage. When you talk about the stress, typically when I've seen the pictures and some of the video, you'd see someone down with something pinned to them saying gunshot or this. These were people that were treated as if they had it. So you see the trauma.
And as much as we try to make it realistic, and as the chief said earlier, you cannot simulate the chaos and the raw emotion of everything that's going on. It just can't be done.
Yeah. Well, that feedback's consistent with what I heard, like the supervisor and the clerk. I observed that day, and the feedback that I heard from everybody was just overwhelmingly positive, that it was a worthwhile exercise. And so they were very grateful to have been included in it. So I thank you for the length and the breadth that you brought to it. In my personal capacity I'm a board member for Jewish Community Security, and in that capacity I have participated in several tabletop exercises related to similar mass incident casualty types of events, but they've always been tabletop. That's where you sit around a table, everyone plays a part. First we'll do this, then we'll do this, but it's not actually doing it. And so what I observed that day, and just the beneficial things that come from observing and seeing how everyone moves and what are we not thinking about, not like the staging of the ambulances or, the remote, just everything that goes into it, you can't get when you're just sitting around a table. And so I just I'm not wearing a hat, but if I did, I would take it off, tip of a cap. Thank you for everything that you do. This is what makes our community the best around. So thank you for everything.
Neil, did you have something?
No, I was just going to say basically what Michael said. Thank you to you and putting together very essential project. It's unfortunate that it has to be so essential, but it's being realistic to do this. And I'm pleased to hear you learn things both positive and negative, and you answered my question that you're going to try and do this on an annual basis, which is, I think, really imperative, because you can take what you've learned and try it out. Plus new issues come up for us.
And one of the things that we're very fortunate to have in this area is the North American Active Assailant Conference that's put on annually, that we've learned so much over the last 8 years, it's 8 conferences, 10 years or whatever it is, but just to have those resources to learn what's happening out there and what's went right, what's went wrong, and you can kind of put that into your scenarios and training to make sure it doesn't happen again.
And I do hope that we discussed about not just doing schools, but doing possibly like place of worship. We have temples, mosques, and churches that sadly everybody seems to be a target there as well, so.
Yeah, open space,
some have
and
mentioned
the
they're
issue is
interested.
finding a location that's willing to host
Right.
and, be shut down for a time period that, but again, our credit goes to the board and to Jason and his team, Carrie and her team, and then obviously our training cadres who really put it together. John and I took an oversight role on it, but we're not the trainers. We haven't been to the schools, or at least I haven't. I want to speak for you, that tells you how to create these things and how to, we rely on our people who did it in this incident. I couldn't have been happier. Yeah, we had some flaws there, but we can strive for perfection. But as long as we strive for it, we're going to do it right. And there's always things we can learn, but our partnerships with Oakway, OakTac, all those agencies that responded, it makes Oakland County worthwhile.
Yeah.
And Mike, for what you, I believe Ryan Smith and Mike Silva put into this for that year prior, the amount of meetings that you had us all at asking all the questions, I think that might have been even more stressful for you than the day of. But there were multiple meetings, and you, Ryan, and Mike handled yourselves beautifully. So thank you for everything.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
So again, I know we've been training to this high standard we always have in our township with the rescue task force. We've been trained to that standard, but when you do an event like this, we do it on the small scale, which you guys do about once a year. You don't get to see all the little things we can do better, right? Best practice at tabletop or in a small scale versus you see all those little things like getting all of the Kirkway or Kirkshire, getting those people further away. Where do we stage everything? The amount of police, ambulance, personnel. When you do scale this big, we get to see the things we can do better at. So then when we actually have an incident, we're already better prepared. So again, we've always trained to these high standards, but now doing events that are this size can then make the best practices even better. So it makes Bloomfield Township, our services, that much better than national standards. So thank you guys for doing it. And thank you guys for being honest about what we can do better at, right? You don't know what you don't know until we have it. So being honest about it and making it better just makes our township have the best services available. So thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You got anything else you want to add?
No, just thank you for your time and letting us present.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Next, we have the budget amendment for the defined benefit pension contributions presented by Jason Theis.
Good luck following that.
I know, it was very interesting.
Do you have any videos, PowerPoints?
Not gonna use. I don't have much to say. I'm going to kind of open it up because everything I want to say about these next 3 items I put in the memo. So just very briefly, the first one we're talking about here, the defined benefit pension plan. If you go back to our November 27th meeting, this was discussed, and I said at that time when it gets closer to fiscal year end, I'll come back and request only what is necessary. So we increased the DB contribution back then by roughly $2.5 million. Not asking for $2.5 million of amendments, again, just enough to for those departments that couldn't absorb it. A lot of these are because they're smaller, so it's just people, and so any outside expense beyond that pushes them over their approved amounts. So I'll leave that there and take any questions you might have.
Anyone have any questions?
I just wanted to clarify, and I'll ask it in the form of a question. So we're increasing the spending, the expense amounts. Are we increasing the revenue account so that this doesn't affect the overall balance of our budget?
Yes. So typically, I would only ask for budget amendments for what's required, which is only expenditures. The Budget Act ignores the revenue side. But I noticed this year when doing that, if you were to look at the bottom line of, say, the general fund, which was approved with a small positive surplus, this would now make it look like we're going to have a deficit because we didn't account for we have the revenue to spend. So I thought may as well just increase the revenue at the same time, which is the interest, investment earnings. We talked about that in November as well, that those are far exceeding what we anticipated. So this, if you were to look at a report after I put all these amendments in, you'll have the same net, like $10,000 surplus in that general fund that was in the original approved budget.
Any other questions? I look for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by trustee Burnett,
Support.
support by trustee
Is that to all three amendments or just the one?
Do you want
No,
one or
just
do you
one at
want?
a time, I thought,
Okay.
because we were just
It
doing the,
wasn't clear, because I think they were kind of summarized all together in the presentation. So the motion is to.
no, this is just
Item
about,
six.
this is
This is
just
for the
about
first
item
one.
6. He hasn't
Item
gone
six.
into
Okay,
7 and 8
okay,
yet.
okay.
Yeah. So motion by trustee Burnett,
Support.
by trustee Kalinsky, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all opposed? That does pass. So next we have the budget amendment for election costs, also Jason.
This one is simple in that at the time of budget approval, we didn't know of any elections that were scheduled. We also didn't know of any legislative changes, both of which happened in this calendar year. So I don't know if Clerk Brook has anything he wants to add, but that's the reasoning. We only know what we know. So both of those had dollars attached, and so we're asking for an increase of about 40 grand to the elections budget to cover those.
Right, exactly. And we just maybe add some, additional details. We put this together, final, the budget begins April 1st. So we've been working on that for months in advance. But still, the amendments to the election law had not been in place. They weren't in place until the end of June, early July. The effective date for some of those are still in process. But as a result of those election changes and different things that came up in the past year, which includes, by the way, the largest rewrite of election law in over 50 years, we ordered just a lot of additional stuff to provide legally required notices about the permanent mail ballot feature and to provide legally required notices to the early voting site and location. Both those were 36,000. Each one of those is 36,000 public printing efforts. Precinct changes had to occur, which was a lot. And then all of you might notice when the AV material comes out, there's an external envelope, an internal envelope, and a secrecy sleeve, which has instructions. All of those things changed. So all the materials we had were no longer any good, and we ordered, about 50,000 of each of those types of things, which will, by the way, cover most of next year. So when we can get ahead of the curve with with the printers, we try to do that too. So a little bit of those will be used throughout the year, but we're required for this election anyway. So yeah, it's been an interesting few months.
Anyone have any questions of Jason or Martin? No? Then I look for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by trustee Kalinsky,
Support.
support by Clerk Brook, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all opposed? That passes. Next, we have the budget amendment for vehicles, also Jason.
Public Works Director Noah came before you last July. There was discussion about back order of vehicles. We didn't get any vehicles in 22-23, so those got shifted and added to the budget for 23-24, along with the ones that were scheduled that year. And there was also discussion of he was able to get board approval to pre-order vehicles that were now going to be coming in 24-25, thinking that we could be waiting a year and a half, 2 years for those to come in. So the good news is that we've received almost all of the 22-23 vehicles. almost all of the 23-24s, and we received most of the 24-25, all in this 12-month budget year. So we're well caught up. We think the delay is gone going forward. So because of those, all of those vehicles coming in and being delivered, I'm requesting an increase to capital outlay in the general fund, specifically for the vehicles, an increase of $300,000. I don't know how you want to, if you want to do these separately or together, but then we're also requesting an increase of $100,000 in the road fund for vehicles they received to their budget. And then similar to the other two amendments, asking for budgeting the offsetting revenue as well to make that a net zero.
So are they allowed to do one summary?
I think you could do one summary motion just to follow the recommendation on item 8.
Is there any discussion or questions for Jason?
No, make a motion and we follow the recommendations as presented by Jason for item 8.
Motion by trustee Barnett,
Support.
support by treasurer Schostak. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That does pass. Thank
Thanks.
you, Jason. Next, we have considered the approval of the final payback agreement for Kilbrennan Road Sanitary Sewer Extension. We have Deputy Director Angie Hysinger.
All right, good evening. I'm here today to present the final payback agreement for the sanitary sewer extension down Kilbrennan Road. Kilbrennan Road's located in the Braz of Bloomfield subdivision number 3, which is directly east of Inkster Road and north of Wing Lake Road. Because this is the first sewer extension project to utilize the township's adopted payback policy, as well as the project itself has spanned multiple years between design and construction, I did just want to take a brief moment to refresh the board on the project timeline as it does relate to the payback agreement or payback policy. The first step in the policy is for the developer to submit engineering plans for the proposed sewer extension to the engineering department. Those plans were received on June 1st, 2021, and after multiple reviews, the plans were approved on October 19th, 2021. The second step in the process is for the developer's design engineer to submit a cost estimate that outlines all of the anticipated design and construction costs associated with the extension. The total project amount outlined in that cost estimate is to be utilized as the not to exceed payback amount that would be represented in the preliminary payback agreement. The developer's engineer, Boss Engineering, submitted that cost estimate on September 29th, 2021, and the township had our consulting engineers, HRC, review it, and HRC approved the cost estimate on October 15th, 2021. The next step was to bring before the board the preliminary payback agreement. We did have a notice requirement to notify the affected property owners 14 days in advance of this agreement coming before the board. Those notices were sent out October 11th, 2021. The preliminary payback agreement was brought to the board for consideration and approved on October 25th, 2021, with a not to exceed payback amount set at $229,250.50, which coincides with the total project amount outlined in the approved cost estimate. Moving into construction, we had our pre-construction meeting on November 15th, 2021. Construction started that following spring on April 18th, 2022. By October 6th, 2023, the construction, paving, and punch list items had all been completed. 3 days later, the township accepted the sewer extension into our public sanitary sewer system. And then on November 20th, 2023, the bill of sale was recorded, which turns over the ownership, operation, and maintenance of that sewer to the township. So the last step in the policy process is to bring forth the final payback agreement, which is why I'm here in front of you tonight. Although not required, we did send out a courtesy letter to all of the affected property owners, notifying them of tonight's meeting and consideration of this agreement. The map here again just identifies the project location and the approximate layout of the newly installed sanitary sewer extension. The 5 properties highlighted are those that now benefit from being able to connect to the public sewer system whenever they voluntarily decide to, or they're required to because of having a failed septic system. Of those 5 properties, 2 of them are already connected to date, the developer's property at 5766 Kilbrennan Road, and then the one directly north of it at 5754 Kilbrennan Road. There were quite a few challenges that did cause additional delay and or costs to this project that I just want to brief the board on before considering the final payback amount to be incorporated into the payback agreement. Right out the gate, there was delays in starting the project due to long lead times on receiving the pipe material. This was a frequent issue that happened on multiple projects during the years of COVID. Additionally, as they started excavating the ground for the utility trench, they ran into wet soils and a high groundwater table, which resulted in the need to use dewatering methods, which again added additional time and cost to the project that was unforeseen. As they started laying out the pipe, they discovered a conflict with an existing gas main that halted the project and required the design engineer to redesign the sewer around the gas main conflict. And the redesign did require an additional manhole to be installed. And as with issues at the beginning of the project, long lead times on material, it took about 9 weeks for that manhole to get in. So again, additional delays to the project and additional expenses with the redesign and the additional manhole that was required. Prior to connecting the sewer extension into the township system, it has to pass an air test to make sure there's no cracks in the system itself. The initial air test had failed due to a crack in one of the Y components associated with one of the sewer leads, so that had to be replaced by the contractor, adding additional time again to the project. And then one of the major issues that we discovered as we were reviewing the as-built plans was that the first and last runs of sewer were actually installed flat. This was due to errors in calibrating the pipe laser. So we did require the contractor to go back and reinstall those 2 sections of pipe to make sure that they meet the minimum slope requirements in our design standards. Again, additional time and additional cost because we had to have our construction observer out there again to observe the reinstallation of those 2 lines. And then lastly, at the end of the project, the Road Commission for Oakland County required the developer to repave the full width of the road for the entire length of the project, which when the plans were being reviewed under the design phase, the Road Commission was only requiring them to repave the portions of the road that were being taken out for the excavation of the utility trench. So this was another unforeseen cost to the developer that didn't appear till the end of the project. So because of the additional unforeseen costs that the developer had to incur, he was wanting to request the board to consider increasing the payback amount prior to the final payback agreement being finalized. The engineering department, taking into account the terms of the payback policy as well as the developer's request, came up with the following 3 options for the board to consider. Option 1 is the most straightforward. It would be to approve the payback amount that was identified in the preliminary payback agreement. That payback amount again was $229,250.50, which split amongst the 5 benefiting properties would require them to pay the developer a connection fee of $45,850.10, which again they wouldn't have to pay until they decided to voluntarily connect to the sewer system or their septic system failed and they are required to connect. Option 2 is more in line with how the township board would approve township projects that we go out to bid for. It would be to approve the payback agreement amount with a 10% contingency increase. And in this case, that would increase the total payback amount to $252,175.55, or split amongst the 5 benefiting properties that would equate to $50,435.11. And then the last option that the developer is seeking the township board to consider is having the payback amount equate to the actual project costs that he incurred for the installation of the sanitary sewer. So the total project cost based on the receipts submitted to our department was $333,720.72, which again split amongst the 5 properties is $66,744.14 per property. I do want to reiterate that aside from the developer's property, the property at 5744 Kilbrennan Road has also connected to the sewer at this time. This is because he had a septic system failure while the sewer was being installed, and as a requirement by the township and the Oakland County Health Department, if sewer is available to connect to, you have to connect to it. So we allowed him to do so under the precedence that he had to pay the developer that not to exceed $45,850.10, because at the time that was really the only requirement we had set in place. We also required the developer to enter into an agreement with the township stating that if the payback amount were to be increased in the final payback agreement, he cannot go back to the owner at 5754 Kilbrennan Road to request additional reimbursement. Likewise, that increase is not split between the other 4 homes, or other 3 homes that are still needing to connect. It's just a cost that the developer eats. So with that, I'd like to ask the board to consider one of the following proposed payback amounts to be incorporated into the final payback agreement prior to execution of the final payback agreement by the township supervisor and the developer. I've outlined the 3 options again on this slide, and for your consideration, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have. The developer's also in the audience in case you have any questions directly for him.
Just to add, thank you guys for bringing all 3. I know I personally wasn't going to be supporting the 3rd one, but I did, although we normally say no exceeding, with everything that happened in COVID, 10% has been something that they've reached. But thank you for going through. I got to go through all the line items with Corey and Angie and see that some would equate for that 10%, but then some that's the danger of when somebody's maybe not someone we would have picked for our projects, maybe not doing certain due diligence, which caused some expenses that we wouldn't have run into had we picked the developer who would have been installing it. So personally, I appreciate all the time you took to going through line by line of what was logical, what was not. So I thank you for that. Is there any discussion on what everybody else thinks about these 3 options?
I'm consistent with the 10% because it is our policy. And we've been using that as our policy, I believe, unless something comes back to the board. So, I mean, that's something that I could support.
Is there any other questions? Or? Okay. Motion.
Yeah, no questions. I mean, I guess I'm not necessarily opposed to, increasing 10%, but I guess that's more just a goodwill gesture, right? I mean,
I'm okay with either one, so I just definitely would be voting no on the last one. But that's why I'm looking for discussion on whatever you guys think of the other 2 options.
So I reached out to Angela earlier today just to kind of go through this to understand how we got here, and similar to you, she went through the line items to explain to me kind of some of the issues that came up. And she was fortunate enough to tell me that they had to relay that pipe in 2 sections of it, but the contractor ate that cost. So that was an additional line item cost to the actual developer. That contractor did, in good faith, fix that item, which is what I would expect. So that wasn't adding to the bottom line. It was some of those other items we talked about, COVID expenses, as well as the repaving. Which, again, if you do your due diligence earlier on in the project, some of those things might have been able to come up, which then, between the developer and HRC, would have then come up with a better cost estimate for everybody to be on the same page. So again, when you come up with a contract, there's a dollar amount that you're on the hook for, right? So our policy gives 10% leniency. I'm with the either approve the original amount that we originally agreed to or 10%, but I can't approve the cost overruns that normally would come out during due diligence times.
And some of, I know with the road part, some of that was because they extended into that area that they maybe wouldn't have if they would done some of the things up front and looked for, I mean, for example, like the gas line, that wasn't a new gas line. That's something that should have been figured out before cutting. Also, soil borings help to understand what you're dealing with. Before you dig in, you usually figure out what you're dealing with. So that was my issue, is kind of rushing forward caused some of these problems.
And it's also hard. I understand he had to de-water the lot. It's sometimes hard. Again, weather was an issue. And again, we had some times that we just had significant rain events, which we knew in the township. But that's just the cost of them doing business. When we try to do it at certain times. It's hard. I've had to do it. It's not fun. But when you do a project, those are some of the risks.
Especially when you're talking about a $21,000 difference per household. That's a big difference. Does anybody strongly towards any of these three options?
I just have a question, I suppose. I'm wondering if our engineers have a recommendation and some reasoning for, we presented three of them, but do you have a reason, a opinion?
We're kind of in the same camp as the board. Option one makes sense because that's the whole reason we have the payback policy in place, is to set that not to exceed amount. However, there were additional costs that we could validate and explain as to why the 10% increase could also be warranted. The additional dewatering, the road paving, those types of things. Yes, to Chris's point, due diligence, doing soil borings up front to know whether or not you needed to dewater. It would have been helpful to have that in the cost estimate up front. However, dewatering would have needed to occur whether or not it was known up front or not. So we were okay with adding that additional expense into the payback amount.
Same for the gas conflict. There would have been a needed added structure for that as well. So that would have been an added cost anyway. So the 10% is justifiable. We wouldn't say offer 10% just because. We have to justify it, and ESD is comfortable with that 10% contingency.
Well, what does the policy say?
Well, I don't know if it's a technical policy. I'm just simply,
we have a policy.
Yeah,
the policy technically is not to exceed, because these are different than our normal ones where we have.
Right, so if the policy says that whatever the preliminary payback agreements is set at, that's what it has to be. So are we risking setting a precedent here where we're going to be flexible on that number?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that when me and Danny were talking about this, we kind of said, in this case, it's kind of a special circumstance because it was constructed during COVID when prices were inflated. So this was kind of, could be considered a special circumstance for when we would go outside of the confines of the policy to approve an additional 10%. But I understand too that, yes, we don't want to set a precedent that we're going to offer this 10% increase on every single project that comes before us with a payback.
If I could add, if just because a contract goes over, it's not to exceed, the township just isn't automatically going to say, okay, it's the policy to give you or offer a 10% contingency. What we're saying is, if there's justification for the added costs that we can verify in our opinions of the construction, that's on the contractor, that's on the builder, and that they're going to eat that cost, not just because there's a 10%
So just so you know, we differed in that. Mine was, I was only doing the 10% because of COVID overages, because frankly, I feel like, again, due diligence, he would have had the proper cost estimate. So my 10% was COVID 2021 prices were distinctly different than 22 and 23, especially before 20. But I feel like if he would have known the COVID prices, maybe that's something. But the others I had issues with, that was not a new gas line. That was not new soil. That was all stuff that had somebody spent more time to do their due diligence, they would have had the proper cost up front.
Yes, but had they done that, there would have been that added cost in the not to exceed amount.
And it would have been approved originally.
Yep.
Yeah. like they would have learned about the gas before they came to you with their plan of how much this would cost. They would have been, hey, we have to go around this big gas line, so it's gonna cost me this much.
Yes, and the same with the dewatering.
Right.
They would have known the dewatering. They still would have had to have done it. They still would have had to engineer around it or add the additional structure, pay for the dewatering. That would have been added to the not to exceed amount in the original request for the project. What we can justify is that if they would have had to done that anyways, then it would have been added to it, and that's why we're comfortable with the 10% contingency.
Yeah, I think in light of COVID, as Supervisor Walsh said, I think that's something that if this happens again in the future, aside from a global pandemic, I think we can justify by saying in that specific project, we granted an exception related to COVID and the price differences, but that's not something that we're going to do on a regular basis.
Right, like I wouldn't normally say, oh, they didn't do their due diligence, so let's hope, like you and I'm a little meaner.
This is our
much nicer.
This is our first go around with bringing a project like this to the board under the new policy. So lessons learned from this project is we can advise the next developer who goes after this to maybe consider adding those items into the cost estimate at the very beginning, so we don't run into this issue at the end of the project.
Right.
That's fair.
And we're not financing this, right?
No.
No.
The neighbors who need to pay $45,000 or $50,000, they pay that and they work that out separately. We're not financing.
Nope. They have to figure out how to finance it on their own end and pay the developer prior to connecting.
Okay, just making sure.
Even the emergency ones, like that person next door?
Yeah, he still had to pay the developer the full amount. I don't know how if he had the cash on hand or if he had to finance it, but he had to pay him.
Well, I'm comfortable to make a motion.
Do you have one more question first?
I just want to make one comment that I would love. So I also want to make sure that people don't think that we're cavalier with the township's money or residents' money, right? So whatever number we do affects 5 homes, whether it's a $45,000 amount or a $66,000 amount. The developer's money is just as important as the residents' money. But at the end of the day, we're held to standards and policies. So nobody's money is more important. It's just we have to follow a policy and make sure we're the best stewards of this money and these actions. So with that, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I'm comfortable and certainly support a 10% contingency increase based on both the COVID issues and the additional costs at that time, plus the justifications that Corey and the department have come up with. I think either way, the 10% certainly is a rational decision, and certainly 30% is extreme, but very comfortable with the 10%.
Yeah, I'll support that because it's a case-by-case basis. I'm sorry.
Support
Clerk
it.
I apologize.
He beat you.
I apologize.
So motion by trustee Barnett, support by clerk Brook. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Thank you. All right, so next we have consider approval of the Roncelli Safety Path Program 2025 route, presented by Director Corey Almas.
Good evening, board. Portion of the Route 25 is identified in the 2008 Safety Path Master Plan is being proposed for your consideration for the 2025 Safety Path, Roncelli Safety Path Program. This is, let's see, we're doing this, sorry. Okay, so here's the master plan. Route 25 is right here on the south end of the township, running from on the north side of West Maple Road from West Surrey to Franklin and tying into the existing path at Franklin Road. Now, staff did consider multiple, it's hard to see it on this PowerPoint here, but staff did consider multiple other locations for construction, but Route 25 or a portion of that made the most sense for the next phase. Again, it's West Maple on the north side from West Surrey to Franklin Road. This year, we just wanted to remind the board that the 2024 path has been approved and it's in the design phases, finalizing the design phases now from Humphrey up to the Clinton River Trail. We're also doing the 2023 Lasser Road on the west side from Quarton to Maple. And also, we're doing the Franklin Road from Kendry to Fremont Street this year as well. The 2025 route on West Maple is going to be about $1,050,000. That's $80,000 in construction costs with $250,000 in engineering. The 2024 route on Telegraph Road is estimated at $1,322,576.38. And the 2023 routes have already been bid and scheduled to begin construction probably in April, weather pending. Gloucester's $716,85, and Franklin Road estimated or bid at $477,706.77 for a total construction cost of $2,600,000. That's engineering and construction. For all combined projects, is $3,650,000. ESD recommendation is that the board approve the suggested safety path route for the 2025 safety path program. Authorize ESD to proceed with the design of the route in 2024 with the bidding and construction of the safety path to take place in 2025 for a preliminary opinion cost of $1,050,000. Lastly, to incorporate the 2024 and remaining 2023 safety path program at a cost of $2,600,000 to the 2024-2025 safety path budget. With that, I'll ask if there's any questions.
Any questions? If not, I'd look for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by trustee Kalinsky.
Support.
Support by trustee Barnett. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Next, we have consider lighting options for the Jan Roncelli safety path at Telegraph Road, Humphrey Avenue, and Clinton River Trail.
So the board has approved the proposed route for the Telegraph Road last year, February 13th. And we've also, the board has approved the proposed route through what we're calling the paper trail. This presentation has to do with the options for lighting. We told the board that we'd come back and show the renderings that were provided by HRC. As you can see here, and this again is just a rendering, but the concept of what we're looking for with this paper road trail. Included with this and included with the contract unit prices, we included lighting. What we're asking for the board is give us some direction of the style of lighting that they would prefer. So again, here's another rendering of the path through that paper trail. And we've come up with 3 different options. This option 1 is the directive lantern lights with an estimated cost of $167,355, and we'll install probably 15 units with this decorative style. We pulled some examples of what this decorative style lanterns or lighting would be. Just to show you the different, you can go down a rabbit hole with all different styles of lighting. But our concern is that we're providing a light that in some cases may cause a light nuisance to the neighbors there. So we're just very cautious of what we're providing or proposing for this trail. Again, here's a concept here of just a decorative light that shields and provides lighting that goes straight down to the path. These are bollard lighting. This is option 2. These are about 4 foot in height. These lights just cascade the lighting just generally in that area. The cost for the bollard style would be $142,605 for 33 units. Because they're not as tall, they would require more lights or more bollards throughout that system. The downside to this style is they really don't cast very far. They're isolated to the path itself. Lastly, option 3 were the commercial lights and what you would see in a parking lot. Our concern with this one is just that. It would look like a football field through that trail, and even though the cost is less than the other 2 options, $133,605 for 12 units, you're still providing more lighting to that area, but again, it might also create that light nuisance for the neighbors there. With that, staff is asking the board's direction as to which of the 3 proposed lighting options would be their preference along the paper road portion of the 2024 Jan Roncelli safety path.
Any questions?
Yeah, I agree with you that option 3 is just far too commercial, and it looks like it's going to throw off a lot of light on top of it, but I don't find it attractive. I agree, it looks like you're at the airport. But the first one, which I find very attractive, how much of a light pollution would that cause or throw out to the surrounding neighbors?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it depends on the style of light and what we can get. And what our intent was is once we had some idea of the concerns of what option the board would want us to go with, we can provide those renderings and lighting plan that shows the luminance, where they go, how far they exceed, and confine them specifically to that safety path. Again, it's just an estimate of $176,000 with 15 units, but we would have to, depending on the unit that we chose, do we want that light to cascade so there's no reflective or no shield that goes out? As you see with these here, they're decorative, they look nice, but they also cast outward. If you went with something more along the, even this one has a bit of a shield on top that directs that light downward, but it still can cast outward. Same thing here, same thing there. And then you go to something like this.
That's the only one that seems to be.
looks good to me.
Yeah, so we've looked at, and our staff has looked at multiple of these lights. There's different styles that we can do that has a better feel, like it would be arched over top and over the path itself, and still has that shield that goes down on the path and doesn't cascade that light outwardly towards the house. It's more specific to the path itself.
So I was just going to say, I do agree that the decorative lighting is charming, but considering the type of path that this is, I think that the bollard lights would look, you don't have the concern of the light spillage, and it's more suitable for the type of path that we have, and you're gonna get, double the units of the decorative light, so accounting for your point of it doesn't cast too much light, well, you're gonna have additional units, so the path will be well lit, obviously, which is, safety is the #1 concern for that, so people can see where they're going, but then we don't have the risk of additional light pollution, and I know that can be a concern, especially for insects rather, like at night. I've actually been hearing a lot about this now recently, that we should try to minimize our light pollution as much as possible for that reason. So I would be in favor of the bollard lights.
Hey, Corey, do these cost estimates include installation?
Yeah, yes.
So this is the cost of the equipment and the installation?
Correct.
And do you have a sense of what the life cycle cost is going to be? Life cycle costs? I mean, in terms of, okay, so we spend $142,000. What happens when those light bulbs burn out? How expensive are they to replace? How difficult are they to replace? What kind of maintenance do they require?
Contract out.
Yeah, it would. DPW would take ownership of the lights, like our building maintenance division would take care of the operation lighting and replacement of the bulbs. LED lighting that lasts forever. It's very similar, not forever, but for a very long time. They're durable. And on top of that, in the quick calculation I did, today, annual cost for, let's say, 25 lights, just for argument's sake. The LED lights generate about 100 watts per light. Okay, so with 25 lights, the average cost of power is roughly 12 cents of kilowatts per hour. So doing that calculation with 25 lights, you're looking at 30 cents per hour.
Is that our cost, 12 cents a kilowatt hour?
Is there 100 LED watt?
I'm sorry?
For LED level, that's still 100 watt?
LEDs are 100, according to the street, this here's LED street lamps. So any.
Those are normally the big, those are the commercial ones.
Yeah, like you'd see on a freeway.
Though.
So if that would be the max, maybe it's 73 kilowatt per kilowatts, or I'm sorry, watts, not kilowatts, watts. So anywhere 73 to 100 watts.
Because I was going to say those bollards would be less than that because they're not shining as brightly and far as a overhead one on the expressway.
Yeah,
our floodlights outside are 12 LED 12.5. We used to have a 250 watt bulb out there, old school. It's now 12.5.
So at 12 cents, the cost of power is 12 cent kilowatts per hour. With 25 units, you're looking at 30 cents per hour, and times 12 hours a day on average, you're looking at about $1,300 a year for power. That might be inflated, but those are the quick calculations that I did today.
And your replacement would just be the light bulb itself, not the whole bollard.
Just the light bulb
whole
itself. Yeah.
Coach light. It wouldn't be the.
I recently came across, I don't know that this would be a viable option, but I recently came across actually bollard lights that look just like that are solar powered. So I don't know if that's something that we would look into, because then
the concern there, Stephanie, great idea.
you don't get the sun.
You don't through that wooded trail. There's really not much sunlight.
It's with the wooded area. I don't know how much you'd get back there.
So I'm with Trustee Barnett on this, on option 1, more with the decorative where it kind of goes over. You also create a canopy so I can make sure the whole path is lit up. I also provide light that goes above the person walking. So the ballards provide basically light below eye level to light up just the area you're walking, versus these type of lights provide light all the way to the whole person. So Supervisor Walsh had mentioned at times being able to see people as they're walking, or making sure you feel comfortable regardless of where you are. If you do the ballard lights, or we're talking about, they're basically shoulder height. So you're not providing that for the 5'9" in me, might be a little taller, but for most people it's going to be at a lower level versus being able to shine over the entire person. And then when you have that cover, you also going to make sure that the bulb and all the electronics are also covered from the weather. So we might be able to get more useful life out of them. I have similar ones at my home. So I would be in favor of option 1, because I can provide lighting to the entire trail and minimize the light spillage or light pollution to our neighboring properties.
I'm just gonna say aesthetically, because even the renderings that you're showing where you have these decorative lights, these are on paths where you have like benches or people are like sitting, and these are more, there's like a basketball court in the corner. That's not the type of path that we're illuminating in this situation. So I just think that it's gonna look kind of funny to have these light poles on this little forest path. I don't know. I mean, that's just me personally. So yeah, in another path, I think I would go for the decorative lighting, but just because of the nature of this forest type of path, I think option 2 is better.
Do you have any photometrics to show? So the first decorative lighting ones you showed I was against, because you could see it spewing out. And photometric wise, you're probably going to get in somebody. In a dark night, I can see 2 houses down. I can see their floodlight, from 3 acres away. So that's what worried me about the original ones. This one does seem to go down. Otherwise, I was leaning towards the bollards as well because I felt bad for the neighbors. Do you have any photometric studies to show how far these are going to shine?
No, I don't, but when we do, we can provide those and bring those back to the board.
Yeah, I could go with, I like that, but I could also go with the bollard because I am concerned about the light spillage. So that information would be useful for me anyway in expressing an opinion between the bollards or that approach.
And then get the photometric lights and see where they're placed, see how far away.
We have a suggestion. taking 3 off, because we didn't hear any support for those, and maybe getting some photometrics or some examples of how far 1 and 2 would spread, doing some photometrics of those.
And can we also get pictures of the path? Because with the tree cover, the decoratives might not make sense. We have pictures? I mean, these are all,
those are like
schematics.
These are just schematics that we pulled off the internet, and just to give you some idea of what a decorative lamp could look like on a path or on a trail.
So I think what they're getting towards, and I was thinking too, is this is distinctly not going to be used as often as like a main road where people are traversing normally. So being that it's such a covered wooded area, these might look completely out of place.
Yes.
It might look like super fancy when you should have come in sweats. So maybe, is that what you mean by rendering, of showing how they would look based in the actual?
I haven't been up there in a while, so I don't remember like how densely treed it is, because if the path is real narrow and you got trees on either side, how are you going to put these kind of lights up?
Yeah, so there will be some clearing through that to construct the trail.
Okay.
It's not going to be extensive. We still want to maintain the look and feel of what that area is, but we also want to provide that natural meandering, curving trail that someone's going to want to walk through, invites people to walk through it.
Also, when we discussed this, and this was not I don't know if this was unanimous. I mean, it wasn't highly controversial either, but it wasn't unanimous because there was some safety concern about taking the path through the wooded area.
Both for the person who voted no, it was safety, and the neighbors dealing with the calls of light pollution, which I get. My neighbor has a floodlight and it's shining in my house.
So, I get it. So
those were my 2 issues.
So again, it would be helpful to see, and maybe now, I mean, you could send somebody up there now, it's snow covered, so you're not going to be able to tell exactly right. But I'm just curious, like how narrow it is and which lights would make the most sense. So I think Mark's suggestion was eliminate option 3 and then do some more research on 1 and 2.
Photometrics on 1 and 2.
Okay. Is there a style that the board, with respect to the?
If we ever were going to go with option 1, it would have to be a downcast one.
Something where it shines down, not out.
Yeah.
So either that or the one that Stephanie likes, either one, the bollards, either one.
Yeah, so the one on the upper left, these are 4 foot tall. There's a cover that goes over. Those are LED, and you can see they just cast right down onto the path. There's not much that goes out and away from the bollard itself, but it's a very, what would be the word, modern light. It doesn't have much character to it. They're really kind of hidden beyond the light itself, as opposed to something like this, which casts out, and same thing down here. So if we're looking for that feel of shining right down on the path, something like this would be my recommendation as far as the bollard style goes.
But that looks like it only shines right in front of it.
Yeah, like
that looks like while you're stepping
two,
there.
At least people can see if there's other people walking down there, or gives you a little more safety or security.
Although that is really cool looking, the one on the top left.
Yeah.
It might not shine enough. We need the porridge, so we've shown you one.
So I think the direction is they want it to shine, but not too much.
Correct. Yeah, and I'm getting that. At least I think what I'm hearing from the board is you're getting that kind of. We're narrowing it down, and that's exactly the direction I wanted to go. If there's a style of the decorative lamp style that shines down over the path, that's not too obnoxious through that area.
A key with LED, in addition to photometrics, is the lumens. So it's not the watt that determines the intensity, it's the heat color, the Kelvin, and most importantly, the lumens.
Perfect.
Because that means more than watts. Watts is expense, lumens is brightness.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, my family owns a lighting company. What are you going to do? And we work in construction places.
Okay.
So.
Right.
All right, so do you guys mind, anyone have a motion to table this?
So
we need a motion?
Motion to table and have Corey come back to us with some additional information on the photometrics of option 1 and 2.
Motion by trustee Barnett, support by trustee Kalinsky. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That does pass. Thank you. So next we have consider approval of the Michigan Department of Transportation agreement for the East Square Lake Road sewer repair.
So, back in 2022, staff learned of the MDOT project on Square Lake Road. The limits are shown from Woodward Avenue all the way out to Updike and beyond Updike Road. So back then, staff took it upon ourselves to inspect the existing utilities that were within the limits of this project. Staff has identified several segments of sanitary sewer that were within these limits that were in need of repair. Two of them are one here right on Woodward that crosses the westbound lanes of Square Lake Road. The purple denotes the the sewer lining here and here, and then there's another complete replacement. The red depicts the remove and replace of the sanitary sewer. It makes perfect sense to do these projects while MDOT has these the road closed for traffic control. So with that, staff is recommending that the Board of Trustees move to approve the MDOT contract number 23-5519 between Bloomfield Township and the Michigan Department of Transportation for the sanitary sewer rehab and replacement work and sanitary sewer lining as described in the contract at an estimated project cost of $379,500, and to authorize the supervisor to sign the contract.
Do you have any questions for Corey? I look for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by trustee Kalinsky.
Support.
Support by trustee Faki. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passes. Thank you. Consider approval of an agreement for information technology IT services between Oakland County and Bloomfield Township. Clerk Brook.
Okay, so this is an IT services agreement between Oakland County and the township, as Supervisor Walsh just mentioned. It's a basic terms of use agreement. It's not a contract for exchange of any funds or a contract for any payment of any money whatsoever. Oakland County, and we utilize various services like the police department is Clemis, IT, GIS. It's a routine matter that comes before the board every couple of years, and it's time for this one now. So it's routine enough that Will asked me to just pass along this little bit of information and ask for the board's approval and authorize the supervisor to sign the contract.
I would also add that this agreement covers the G2G payment processing that Oakland County provides for us, both for our paying taxes as well as just our ability to collect credit cards at the counter. And as part of that agreement, we get a share of what they call enhanced access fees. That's their transaction fee. We get a share of those enhanced access transaction fees. That is a rebate back to us.
Any questions? If not, I look for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by trustee Barnett.
Support.
Support by trustee Kalinsky. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That does pass. So next we have the Treasurer's Quarterly Report presented by Treasurer Schostak.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to start out my report tonight by acknowledging our new Deputy Treasurer who's here. You've all had a chance to meet her, Mary J. Baharian, who is also a township resident, so we're excited to have her aboard. And for those who haven't had a chance to talk to her, you can talk to her on Wednesday when we have our annual investment review study session. So I remind all board members that at 8 o'clock on Wednesday morning, we'll be back here in the auditorium for a discussion on our investments. Okay, in front of you tonight is the quarterly treasury report that, pursuant to statute, As treasurer, I'm responsible for providing a report quarterly to the township board. I won't go into too much detail. I'll save that for Wednesday, but basically you can see it broken into 3 categories. The first are operating funds. Those are the funds that we have for our day-to-day operations, including our what they call surplus funds, which we can invest according to Public Act 20. So we have that in money market funds as well as a bond portfolio, and we now have the local government investment pool of MI class. So thank you all for approving that at the last meeting. You don't see it referenced here because this was as of December 31st at the end of the last quarter for those funds. The next category is the fiduciary directed investment accounts, which are the pension plan and retiree healthcare plan. Again, we'll go into much more detail on Wednesday. And then the last one is the participant directed investment accounts, which are the defined contribution plans that employees that are not eligible for the pension or healthcare. They have a 401A plan that we contribute funds every year. They have a deferred compensation plan that they can contribute their own funds as pre-tax savings. And we have a retirement health savings plan that, again, employees are required to contribute to, as well as the township. We match 3% of the contributions to the healthcare savings plan. So with that, I will open for any questions, and if there aren't any questions, I would ask for a motion to accept the report for the record.
Any questions?
Make a motion and look forward to the full report on Wednesday.
Likewise, second.
Motion by trustee Barnett, second by trustee McKee. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That does pass. Next, we have election law and process update by Clerk Brook.
Okay, let's see, it's 9 o'clock, so we're on schedule. We're doing pretty good. I'm going to be fast here as possible. I do want to address the public comment that was mentioned earlier. Clearly,
something that wasn't correct.
Clearly, well, yes. I don't know why the city of Bloomfield Hills is mailing our residents information about early voting. We will be in contact with them tomorrow. It is a concern, absolutely, because any instructions that were provided to these residents for the early voting site would not be accurate. Our early voting site for Bloomfield Township is the public library, the Bloomfield Township Public Library, and the early voting site for the city, which has nothing to do with our voters, so if you went there, they would turn you away, is at the city of Bloomfield's location itself. So we'll figure that out. All the clerks have access to the qualified voter file on a statewide basis, and someone there, clicked on the wrong spot and included some addresses that shouldn't have been. Why, I don't know. But we'll have it corrected, no doubt about it. Either they're going to send, one way or the other, people are going to get a correction. So there's no confusion about where they should go. And the security, by the way, the qualified voter file was also questioned about anything concerning this IT services agreement. It's not a subject of between the county and the localities. It's a state file and system that's secured through other methods. So that's why it's not addressed anywhere in there. Okay, on to slide number 2, Sean. Oh, that's not on slide number 2, but we'll go with it. So I want to talk a little bit about something that we accomplished recently, and this is an editorial from the Detroit News, which came out last week on Thursday the 18th. And because of all the new things that are out, the delays that the state has with regard to reprogramming the qualified voter file and reprogramming all different the electronic poll book and the preparation of forms, they really put a huge burden on local clerks to accomplish all of this. So yes, the Secretary of State is the chief elections official, but that it all gets done locally. As I think people know, the elections are run by your neighbors, your community members, and your friends. And it was you can go to the next slide, Sean, please. A group of folks that are the residents, township retirees, and my staff that worked to accomplish what the Detroit News says was an impossible task. So there's 4 of us that work in the office, plus myself, on a regular basis. We're supplemented by 14 additional part-time staff for the past month, working on accomplishing what the Detroit News says was the impossible. And because of the collaboration of those folks, the collaboration that we received from other township employees who decided to come in and work on Friday and Saturday, which would be part of their weekend. And importantly, because of the help of the cable department, we were able to meet the requirements that were in the statute. That honestly, there's more than 1,000 clerks, and a lot of them don't have the resources we do and the ability to call on a variety of departments to help out. So we are fortunate in that regard. So I'll go to the next slide, Sean. This is just a quick little snapshot. Since we've moved the presidential primary, I say we, I mean the state did, to the end of February instead of March, it means that the clerk staffs are working through the Christmas and holiday season at the end of the year. So the beginning of December, we were preparing what the absentee ballot applications would look like, working with vendors to print them. The mailing date is just the last thing that happens, of course. There's a lot of work goes into that. So we were mailing the absentee applications before the holidays and then before the New Year's. And we have presently 20,000 people in this township that are on one of our permanent lists. So there's the absentee ballot application list, which has existed for a decade. And now there's the permanent mail ballot list, which started this because of the changes in election law, which started this August, when we mailed out 37,000 ballot selection forms throughout the township. So there's 20,000 applications or selection forms that are out there. We also had to change, as you know, a couple of precinct locations, and this is another thing that happened because of the amount of legal changes that we're engaged in, the pressure on the Secretary of State to modify forms and documents, which all came out the last minute in mid-December. The printing houses were unable to provide the support. We did receive printing support for the mailing of the absentee ballots and the ballot selection form, 20,000 items, which I can say that many clerks in Oakland County did not get printing from the printing houses. And instead were, at their copiers and, putting stamps on things and running through stamping machines and all sorts of crazy stuff. So this happened because of the hard work of my staff and staying on top of it and being as proactive as we can. And one of the things I complain about all the time in the clerk world is it's very difficult to be proactive because we're waiting for everybody else. And strangely, they think that the last part of the task is the easiest part, when in fact it's the hardest part. So mailing houses couldn't prevent print mailings, and clerks were scrambling. That did happen to us with regard to the polling place location notices. We had to order blank cards informing folks of their new polling place, order blank envelopes and blank paper. My staff worked during that week between Christmas and New Year's, printing all of these things on our copy machines and printing all the envelopes. And then we were stuffing them through the first 2 weeks of January, doing that mailing ourselves. Now, during this time, we started to receive the responses back from folks. So we, for the week after we've accomplished that in-house mailing, was sent out. We received 6,716 applications and ballot selection forms. And what's a ballot selection form? Well, this is a closed primary. Michigan has a closed primary, so people have to pick the ballot they want. There's not one ballot to mail out to everybody. So each person has a choice of 3 separate different ballots. There could be the proposal-only ballot. There is a library proposal to renew their millage, or the Republican primary ballot, or the Democratic primary ballot. And each person has to pick that. We can't mail it out without them picking it. And you'd be surprised how many of these things come back. There's only 2 things to do on it: pick your ballot and sign it. And hundreds come back. They're incomplete. We end up following up on. So on the 18th, with the help of the cable department, we sent out about 5,000 emails and about 5,000 phone calls and about 5,000 texts. Some of you may have gotten all three of those things. If we didn't have email or phone numbers, we weren't texting, we were sending out letters. And that was something that was required by the statute. It's part of what the Detroit News mentions as the impossible task. It's also what we accomplished just with the help of the cable department and my office staff working hard to get that done. Identifying who's on that list is, of course, one of the key things, and then setting up the vendors and getting it out was quite an amazing collaborative effort. And then today, 6,716 ballots were mailed out. It's just the beginning of the mailing of these items. Election day, well, let's go to the next slide, Sean. Let's skip this one and we'll go to the next one and come back. So I want to talk about the deadline. So we mail out 6,700 ballots, but there's another 6,000, 7,000 ballots that we haven't mailed because people haven't picked their party or advised us that they don't want a presidential primary ballot or a proposal-only ballot. But if we don't get a selection, we will mail everybody the proposal-only ballot on or about February 1st. Over the next couple of weeks, because of the phone calls and letters and so forth, we hope to narrow that, whittle that down from 6,000 to maybe 3 or 2 or 0. But that's what's looming next for us. The 16th, for individuals out there, you want to keep the next dates in mind. February 16th at 5 p.m. is the last day to spoil a returned absentee ballot. So we already do have ballots back because we issue ballots over the counter. Even though I just mailed ballots today, people do come in and a ballot is issued over the counter, they vote it right there and return it in. So if you've done that, the last day to spoil that ballot is February 16th at 5 p.m. That is a week sooner than usual. So folks should keep that in mind. It's a week sooner than usual because early voting starts on the 17th of February at the Township Library. Now, February 16th at 5 p.m. is also the last day to spoil an unreturned ballot and receive a new one in the mail. And someone may have spilled coffee on their ballot or filled in the wrong block and they want to get a new one in the mail. That's their last day to call us and say, we'd like a new one. So we'll start early voting the next day at 8:30 in the morning at the Township Library. It's a collaborative site between Birmingham, Southfield Township, and Bloomfield Township. I'm happy that it's in the township. It was the most important thing that when we're negotiating with the county and other municipalities, in my opinion, we had to have one in the township. And so I'm happy we do have one here in the township, and that also it's collaborative, so the costs are shared between 3 communities. The city of Bloomfield Hills decided to not participate in this group and hold their own, which is how I know for sure that their mailing doesn't identify our collaborative early voting site. February 26th, 4 p.m., the folks have not returned their ballot. They can come in person into the clerk's office by 4 p.m. on that day, spoil a ballot that's not been returned. Either they lost it, they didn't get it, or they've just changed their mind. But they can only do that in person, and we've given a ballot there in person. We can't mail one out that's at that point in time. It's the day before the election, but they do have an opportunity to come in there. So, for instance, on February 1st, if we mail you out a proposal-only ballot, but you really wanted the Republican ballot, you can come in until the 26th into my office and get another absentee ballot, or you can take that ballot and go to early voting and turn it in and obtain a precinct-only ballot or on election day. So there's a lot of options, but law requires us to mail something to all those folks on the permanent mail ballot list, because that's what the Constitution says. Everybody's going to get a ballot mailed to them for every election after they apply. What the proposal writers didn't think about was the fact that we have a closed presidential primary. So here we are trying to really work around a system that is what it is. Interesting new factor. I'm going to get into that next slide a bit more too, but the last item here is March 1st, is if folks have a mismatched signature, and this happens a surprising amount of times, that people sign their ballot in a manner that's different than their signature on file with the Secretary of State on their driver's license. So check your driver's license. You want to sign it like that. If it's not sufficient match, we will reject it, which happens to hundreds of ballots. And then a couple hundred others come in completely unsigned. But because of the new law and the constitutional change, people have till March 1st, the Friday after the election, to come into our office and correct a mismatched signature. Usually that was by 8 p.m. election day, but they now have until March 1st at 5 p.m., which of course is a Friday, which we will be staffed to be here to do. Next slide, Sean.
What's the reasoning to do it after election day?
I don't know. I say often that they're just laws. They're not don't have to be reasonable.
I bet my clients would like that one.
They're just laws. No one said they're reasonable. Some of them are reasonable, some of them aren't. But they're all laws just the same. There's a lot of new things. I've talked about several of them. Permanent mail ballot list, that's the apply once, receive a ballot all the time idea. But whoops, closed primary, what do we do about that? So we're working on it, figured it out. That was probably the impossible task that Detroit News mentioned, and with, again, collaboration of a lot of folks here in the township, we got that done. The permanent absentee list, that's the list that's existed for about a decade. People are on that, and what we do in that case is we mail them an application for a ballot. That will sunset and go away when the Secretary of State decides. The statute requires it to be sunset, but the Secretary of State has that discretion. My hope, which I've expressed, is that will be at least through the 2024 voting cycle before they sunset the permanent absentee list. Early voting, we were amongst the first to do that back in November 23, and so we've got some experience under our belt. It's Bloomfield Township Library. It starts Saturday the 17th and goes through Sunday the 25th, 8:30 to 4:30, except Thursday it's noon till 8 p.m. Early voting of the absentee ballot and tabulating, that's something brand new we've not done before. We have the ability to do that for a full week before Election Day. We're presently planning on doing early absentee processing and tabulating, which means we're not just opening it and unfolding it, but we are running the ballot through the tabulator, which we have 2 high-speed tabulators, which doesn't display totals or vote counts to anybody until after the close of the polls. And only after the memory devices are plugged into what's called another computer called the count, which translates the scanning into actual votes. That's the 23rd, 24th, and 26th. Yes, please.
Where are you doing that to make sure it's safe and secure?
Great question. So we're going to be in the senior center, in one of I think it's one of the community rooms upstairs. And because there's early AV processing over a number of days, they've also changed the requirements that people no longer have to be sequestered. So some of our workers can go for lunch and come back. But it's at the senior center, Friday the 23rd, Saturday the 24th, and then Monday the 26th. The ballots are here, locked in my office, under lock and key in my locked office here at the township until they are delivered to the individuals on that day for counting that day. One of my favorite changes, which not only is it a law, it's reasonable, is that you can start tabulating. An individual can take their AV or absentee voter ballot that was issued and directly tabulate that. They can fill it out at home, do all the research they want, and directly take that to an early voting site or on election day and run it through the tabulator themselves. So it's really the best of both worlds. Folks want to get their ballots early. They want to spend some time on it, especially the bigger ones as we go on this year. And folks like to put it through the machine. I do. So they get to do that themselves. And that happens both at early voting or election day. And that's something brand new as well that hasn't happened before. So if you still want to come in and get a different ballot because you didn't get the one you want or you made a mistake, you can do that on election day or during early voting. But if you're satisfied with the ballot as you've completed it, you can take it to those sites and run it through the tabulator yourself. So it's a lot of new stuff going on. It's pretty exciting. We're all very excited about it. And it's very rewarding work that I enjoy, and I know my staff does as well. So any other questions? Or
Just thank you for that update.
Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you to your team. Clearly, you guys had to do a lot in a short period of time and complete the impossible task. And clearly, the cable department helped you out. So, like, good shout out to
Absolutely.
them. So, thank you to your team for those late nights and long hours,
Yeah,
especially around the
thanks.
holidays. So, it was very much appreciated. Thank you.
Absolutely. As I said, we all, we do it because it's a great mission and we enjoy it. And, I can't say enough about public service and the people who engage in it. It's wonderful.
Great.
Okay, thanks for the time. And, 9:20.
Next, we have approval of payroll and vouchers for January 22nd. We've all had a chance to look them over. I'd look for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by trustee Kalinsky,
Support.
support by trustee Barnett. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? And next, we have motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by clerk Brook,
Support.
support
Thanks
by
for waiting, everybody.
All in favor?
You didn't do that.
Aye.
Wait.
Boy, you really wanted to get it to that exact time, didn't you?